Good afternoon, dear children. In the previous class, we had finished with the discussion of the favorable geographical conditions required for the cultivation of cocoa plants. Now, today we'll be proceeding further with the processing or the steps to process the cocoa beans. The cocoa beans are processed in the following four steps. Number one, the cocoa pods are split open with a simple knife and the beans and pulp are carefully scooped out. Now then these are laid out in the heaps on the ground or on the leaves or in the wooden boxes, and then they are covered with the banana leaves for fermentation, and after a week they are then taken out, washed, cleaned and then sun dried. After that, these are graded. After they are sun dried, they are approximately then sorted out. Grading is done according to the quality, and then they are packed and sent for export. Now, all these processes you will see clearly, completely in the video which I am tagging along, which I have chosen from the YouTube. But it's a very good documentation from the National Geographic Channel, and they have clearly shown all these four steps and how they are done. In that video, you'll also be looking at the uh, reasons or the causes of reduction in the cocoa production in Ghana. What are the basic reasons? In that video, they have clearly discussed those also. Number one, the trees which are there already, they are very, very old, so they are producing less pods. Number two, there are some particular diseases which have spread along in the trees of the cocoa. Therefore, it has affected the production of the cocoa pods. And bad farm management, that means they do not know as to how to give the fertilize the trees, or how to eliminate the diseases. All of that comes under bad farm management. Next is the byproducts of cocoa. There are just two basically, that is the animal feed. That means they are used to feed the animals, whatever is left. And they are also used in the soaps and cosmetics. You must have heard about the cosmetics in which they just say cocoa butter is being used. What is the cocoa butter? The pulp on which in between which the beans are there. The pulp is removed and then it is dried. So all of that is also used as a byproduct of cocoa. Next, we'll be discussing the cocoa production and export. Here we should understand that USA and Europe are the largest importers of cocoa beans from Ghana, and the chief ports where the cocoa is exported from Ghana are Hamburg is in Germany, it's in Europe, and it is along your Strait of Gibraltar. Marseilles port is the main trade seaport of France, and New York Harbor is one of the world's largest natural harbors in North America, that is along your Lake Ontario, and we have done that in class 6. Port of New Orleans is also in United States in Louisiana, and both we had marked in class 6, and therefore we have no confusion regarding New York and New Orleans.
Once a flower's been pollinated, we have what we call a set, and then when it gets slightly larger, we call it a churro, before it then grows into a fully developed pod. This absolutely stunning cocoa tree is a Trinitario hybrid. Now, the economic life of the tree is about 30 to 35 years. The tree will actually grow and stay alive for about 100 years, but the economic life as to when we can actually process enough beans to make a profit is about 30 to 35 years. After that time, the tree will be cut down and a new tree will be planted in its place. Now for this particular hybrid, we can see the immature pods here. This one's purple and green. As this one completely ripens, it will be a bright, vibrant red, and the green part will actually be a bright yellow. We've got the ones that are all purple. As they ripen, we'll find that it'll be completely bright red. Here we have a beautifully ripe Trinitario hybrid. We can see the red colour on one side and a slightly yellow colour on the other. So when this started out growing, it would have been purple and a little bit of green here, which as it ripens, you can see those colours develop. Most cocoa pods have an average of 35 beans, but based on the size of this one, I think it'll have a few more. So you can see the husk is really quite thick. The beans themselves are actually inside the pulp. So if we take one here, we can actually taste it. It's really light and quite refreshing, but it doesn't have much flesh on it at all, and that's broken down during the fermentation process. The great thing about a hybrid is it's much less prone to disease, although there is still disease present in some cocoa plantations. Now here we have an example of black pod, which is a fungal disease which is present in Ghana. So we have that here. So to eliminate that, we simply remove the damaged pods from the tree and it won't actually spread. Here we have an example of the swirling shoot, which is a disease carried by a bug called the mealybug. Now the mealybug, once it actually feeds on an infected tree, if it goes to a healthy tree within 6 hours, it will then infect that healthy tree. The downside of this disease means that once the tree has the disease, it has to be removed completely to ensure that it doesn't actually spread. The first sign of the disease being present in the tree is actually the yellowing of the leaves. The next sign, you'll actually visually see it on the pods themselves, and then an acute system is actually the swelling here of the stem. So one of the steps that they're taking, there are several, is to actually plant barrier trees, which the disease will go into those barrier trees rather than penetrating into the actual plantation. They're also creating hybrids of cocoa that are more resistant to the disease, and eventually they hope to eradicate it completely. This is one of the great things about the Cocoa Research Institute here in Ghana, is trying to eliminate diseases such as this disease to ensure that farmers can grow a healthy cocoa tree. I'm here with Osa on his cocoa farm in Ajay in the eastern region of Ghana. Now we're standing in front of a young tree which is only 4 months old. So it's important for farmers not only to try different hybrids of trees, but also to plant younger trees so when the other trees get old. Now we're at the stage where I actually cut the pods open. As I'm a novice, I only get a stick. I don't actually get one of the big knives, which is a bit disappointing, but probably a little bit safer. So normally they're cut with a knife and the pod is cracked open. And as you can see, it's really quite thick, but I'm going to attempt it with a stick. Here we go. So the husks themselves, we actually place down underneath the trees, and it's important, Susanna actually moves this process all around the farm because the husks will break down and give nutrients to the trees. So they make sure that it's spread throughout the farm and not always in the same position. So another reason why I wasn't trusted with the knife is because if you actually cut through to the beans themselves, you'll actually damage the beans. So we remove the beans. Not doing a great job here. Sorry, Susanna. And the placenta itself, which I've got here, can go in and it ferments quite well, but it does then have to be removed for the drying process. So Susanna actually removes it at this stage so it doesn't go in to ferment with the beans. Now you can either use plantain leaves or banana leaves, and they've poked holes in the base. Poking holes in the base enables the flesh, as it breaks down to a liquid, to actually drain through. This process takes 6 days. The beans will be turned 3 times in those 6 days to ensure that they ferment evenly. So you can see that they've actually wrapped the cocoa beans. So this stage of the process is really essential to determine the end flavour of the chocolate. It's a fermentation stage. Now, after a lot of begging and maybe a little bit of crying, I finally have a machete. You can see all these small flies in the area, which is fantastic, and that's created by the breakdown of the pods. But what they actually do is they will actually pollinate the cocoa flowers. The husks themselves can actually be burnt down and used as soap or laundry detergent. They're actually mixed with a red oil and then they're placed on the fire until it creates an ash. So the oil completely burns off, and that's used quite commonly here in Ghana for both a laundry soap and a soap for your body. After 6 days of fermentation, the beans are then dried. So this is day 1 of drying. So any membranes or placentas that haven't been removed during the picking process at the start of the fermentation is now removed at this stage. So the drying process can take between 7 and 14 days depending on weather. They are covered at night. As soon as the sun goes down, they'll actually roll this back and then they'll cover it with plastic. They also do this if it starts raining. So the drying period will extend if there is rain. So here we have the beans after 3 days of drying. Now, how to determine whether they're dry enough? They listen to the sound. They make a lot more noise when they're drier. Another test is to pick them up and squeeze them in your hand. If they stick to your hand, it means they've still got too much moisture and they're not dry enough. So you can see that they're sticking, and we know that because they've only been drying for 3 days. These beans are now 6 days old, and you can see that the sound gets louder the drier that they get. And when I pick them up in my hand, they don't stick at all, which tells me that they're quite dry. These probably need another 2 days before they're ready to be bagged.
You are welcome to the drying side. And then with Ghana, we rely on the solar, that's the sun, to dry our cocoa bean. And then the drying of the cocoa takes 7 to 14 days depending on the weather. If you are in the dry season, drying of the bean is faster. In the rainy season, as you can see, the weather is a bit down. When it's about raining, we have to cover it up, and then we put a roofing sheet on top to prevent it from getting wet. Otherwise, they'll go moldy. If the beans are not well fermented, you end up having a lot of purple beans. And I know that purple beans are not needed in the chocolate companies, okay? And then when the beans are over fermented, based on sensory analysis or evaluation, we realize that you get these off flavors. It's a bit astringent. It bites you, okay? The bitterness is very high. You need to add a lot of sugar, and even with that, you wouldn't be able to correct it. But when you ferment for the 6 days and then 10 every 2 days, you end up having, you know, the standard or the correct bean that we need.
Now I'm here in a PC shed. Now this is a place where the farmers will bring their cocoa to get it weighed, so they don't need to have exactly 64 kilograms, which is what fits in one of these sacks.